The stars above Hadrith, 9 shimmered like frozen fire, and Captain Elias Vance had seen them 1,000 times. But tonight, they looked different, almost judgmental, as if the universe itself knew what he was about to do. "You really think this is a good idea?" Lieutenant Marla Dane whispered, her voice barely carrying over the hum of the stealth field surrounding their small observation post. Elias smirked, but didn't look away from the council chamber below. "I don't do good ideas, Dane. I do necessary ones." The Galactic High Council was in session, an assembly of ancient races whose laws governed the known universe. Elias and his small human crew had managed to infiltrate the edges of this forbidden world, breaking more cosmic regulations than he could count. The plan was simple: listen, learn, and leave. The execution? That was another matter entirely. The council chamber was a grandiose structure, a dome of shimmering violet light that seemed to hover weightlessly above the jungle below. Inside, representatives of every major spacefaring species sat in their crystalline seats, their forms as varied as the stars. Some had exoskeletons of living metal, others pulsed with bioluminescent veins of raw energy. The Zarithi floated, beings of pure thought encased in shimmering light, while the Goric warlords stood as massive, tusked creatures draped in ceremonial armor. And at the center, the reason Elias had risked everything to come here, the galactic law of war prohibition on humans. It was the oldest law in the books, written millennia before humanity even discovered the jump drive. The reasons had always been vague, buried under layers of bureaucratic nonsense and cultural justifications. Elias had never understood it, but he had seen its effects. Humanity could trade, explore, and even defend itself, but they were never, under any circumstances, allowed to wage war. For a species that had spent its entire history perfecting the art of battle, it was an existential insult. "The council is in session," the deep, resonant voice of the presiding speaker echoed through the chamber. The gathered aliens fell silent. A holographic projection flared to life in the center of the chamber, a battlefield frozen in time. Not from the past, but from the future. A war that had not yet happened. Elias felt the breath catch in his throat. He recognized the terrain. The ruins of Kepler, 22b, a planet on the edge of human territory. The enemy? He didn't recognize them, but they were monstrous, towering reptilian creatures with bioplasmal weaponry fused into their very bones. The battlefield was a wasteland of fire and destruction. The humans, however, were winning. No, not winning, annihilating their enemy. The council chambers murmured with unease. The Zarithi's light dimmed. Even the Goric warlords, creatures who respected nothing but combat, exchanged nervous glances. Elias leaned in. "What the hell is this?" Marla's hands danced over the holoscanner. "It's a predictive model, Captain. The Council's best AI is simulating the battle based on our current technology and strategy trends." Elias watched as the human forces adapted in real time. At first, they fought with standard tactics, using mechanized divisions and orbital bombardments. But when the enemy shifted, the humans changed faster. They began countering attacks before they even came. The reptilian forces collapsed in days. Then something even stranger happened. The model kept going. The war ended, but humanity didn't stop. The simulation showed human forces learning, refining, improving. By the end of the projection, the humans weren't just fighting wars. They were eradicating threats before they could begin. Species after species fell, not out of malice, but out of pure, terrifying efficiency. The silence in the chamber was suffocating. A Zalari diplomat, a serpentine being with iridescent scales, finally spoke. "You see now why this law exists." A murmur of agreement rippled through the council. The Goric leader, usually a vocal supporter of military strength, shook his massive head. "They are too good at it." Elias clenched his fists. "They're afraid of us." Marla swallowed. "Maybe they should be." The presiding speaker's glowing eyes dimmed. "Humanity does not understand what it is. You see war as conflict, as struggle, but it is more than that. It is a force of nature. And humanity is uniquely, dangerously suited to mastering it." Elias turned away from the chamber, his mind racing. He had come here to prove humanity's right to fight. Instead, he had discovered why the universe could never allow it. The journey back to the Nemesis was silent, but not because of the stealth protocols. Captain Elias Vance had no words for what he'd just seen, and neither did Marla Dane. The jungle world of Hadrith. 9 blurred beneath their cloaked shuttle as it ascended, but Elias wasn't seeing the thick canopy of alien trees or the bioluminescent rivers. He was still watching that hologram, still seeing his people tear through the enemy like a wildfire, their tactics adapting faster than any machine could predict. Still hearing the Council's verdict. They are too good at it. His grip tightened around the flight controls. They were afraid, not of humanity's aggression, but of something far worse. Our potential. Marla finally broke the silence. You saw it too, didn't you? Elias exhaled through his nose. Saw what? She turned in her seat, eyes sharp. That simulation, those battles. It wasn't just humans fighting back. It was humans improving. We don't just react. We adapt. The moment we engage in war, we start playing the long game. And that's what scares them. Elias didn't answer. He couldn't. The moment they docked with the Nemesis, Elias strode off the ship, heading straight for the war room. Marla followed, her boots barely making a sound against the metal deck. Commander Harlan Ortez and Chief Engineer Rin Voss were already waiting. The holographic display in the center of the room flickered to life, a scan of the Council's security network overlaying star charts and fleet formations. Ortez was the first to speak. Did you get what we needed? Elias ignored the question. Instead, he pointed to the holographic battlefield still fresh in his mind. Pull up the Council's war simulation. The one they ran tonight. Rin hesitated. Captain, that system's locked behind. Do it. Rin grumbled, but got to work, his fingers dancing over the controls. Moments later, the terrifyingly efficient human war machine flickered to life in front of them again. The battle against the reptilian species played out just as before, humanity responding, adapting, improving. And then, the part that had frozen the Council in fear, the aftermath. Ortez crossed his arms, watching the human forces sweep through the stars like an unstoppable force. Damn, he muttered. We didn't just win. We rewrote the rules. Marla nodded. And that's why they won't let us fight. Elias stepped closer to the projection. That's why they're wrong. The room went silent. Ortez frowned. What are you saying, Captain? Elias turned, his voice measured but firm. They think they can ban us from war like we're some kind of universal hazard. But they don't understand us. This isn't about conquest or bloodlust. It's about survival. If a threat like this reptilian species comes knocking on our door, do you think they'll hold back? Marla exhaled. No. They'll burn Earth to the ground while the Council sits on its hands, congratulating itself on upholding intergalactic law. Ortez cracked his knuckles. So what's the plan? Elias looked at the simulation one last time. The final moments showed something bigger than just military strategy. Humanity didn't just defeat its enemies. It learned from them. Every engagement fed into the next. Every conflict forged something sharper, stronger. What the Council saw as a threat, Elias saw as evolution. He turned to his crew, his decision made. We proved them wrong. We proved that humanity isn't just some uncontrollable wildfire of destruction. We show them that our ability to wage war isn't a curse. It's our greatest strength. And we do it without firing a single shot. Rin raised an eyebrow. How the hell do we do that? Elias smirked. We play their game. We outthink them, outmaneuver them, and when the time comes, we win without war. The Nemesis hummed beneath them, a predator waiting in the shadows. For now, they were bound by the Council's laws. But Elias knew one thing for certain. Laws change, but human nature doesn't. And when the time came, they would be ready. The Nemesis drifted just outside the Hadrith 9 system, its stealth field blending seamlessly with the void. On board, Captain Elias Vance stood at the heart of the war room, watching as their next move unfolded in real time. The Galactic High Council thought they had humanity under control, thought they had clipped their wings with a simple decree. They were wrong. Status report, Elias said, arms crossed. Marla Dane, standing at the main console, tapped a few commands. Phase 1 is complete. We successfully infiltrated the Council's data network and retrieved every war simulation they've ever run on humanity. Ortez whistled low. And Marla turned, eyes gleaming. It's worse than we thought. Every time they run a model, we don't just win. We evolve. The AI predicts that if humanity ever enters unrestricted war, we won't just become the dominant power in the galaxy. We'll become the only power. A silence settled over the room. It wasn't pride that filled the space. It was understanding. Rin Voss ran a hand through his graying hair. No wonder they're terrified of us. Elias stepped forward, eyes locked onto the holographic battlefield. That's what they don't get. We're not warmongers. We don't fight for conquest. We fight because when we have to, we make damn sure we never lose again. Ortez cracked his knuckles. So, Captain, what's our play? We going in loud. Elias shook his head. No, we go in smart. The Council thinks banning us from war makes the galaxy safer. We're going to prove that without us, it's more dangerous than ever. Marla raised an eyebrow. And how do we do that? Elias smirked. We give them a reason to regret their decision. The plan was simple. Force the Council to witness their own failure. Humanity may have been shackled by the law, but the rest of the galaxy wasn't. Somewhere out there, war was brewing. It was inevitable. And when it did, they would make sure the Council had no choice but to call for help. Because when the worst happened, who would they turn to? Not the Goric warlords, who fought for honor but lacked strategy. Not the Zarithi, whose advanced minds were powerful but detached from the brutality of real combat. Not the Zalari, who could manipulate matter but lacked the will to do what was necessary. No, when the flames of war came, they would need humans. And that moment was coming sooner than they realized. Marla's console beeped urgently. Her eyes flicked over the data stream. Then she froze. Captain, she whispered. You're not going to believe this. Elias frowned. What? She turned, her face pale. A distress signal. From Kepler, 22b. The room tensed. Ortez leaned in. The same Kepler, 22b from the simulation? Marla nodded. It's under attack. Rin let out a slow breath. The Council predicted this and did nothing. Elias clenched his jaw. This was it. The moment they had been waiting for. Marla continued, voice rising. The reptilian species from the simulation, they're real. And they're here. The Council thought it was just a theoretical exercise, but this invasion is happening right now. Elias' pulse pounded. He looked at his crew, seeing the fire in their eyes. They had been told they could not fight. They had been told they must not interfere. And yet, who else would stop this? Elias turned to Ortez. Prep the ship. We're moving out. Ortez grinned. Thought you'd never ask. Rin hesitated. Captain, if we do this, we're violating galactic law. Elias stared at the hologram, watching the distress signal pulse like a heartbeat. A dying heartbeat. He turned back to his crew, voice steady. Then we'd better make it count. As the Nemesis powered up and prepared to jump, Elias knew one thing for certain. The war had already begun. And this time, humanity wouldn't be watching. They would be leading. End of Section 3. Let me know if this works before I move on to Section 4. Rocket fire. Nemesis shot through slip space, a silent dagger cutting toward the war-torn skies of Kepler, 22b. Alarms blared across the war room as sensor feeds flooded in, burning cities, desperate resistance, and an enemy force that had never lost a battle. Until now. Elias Vance stood at the center of it all, his hands clasped behind his back, his voice steady. Marla, do we have comms with the planetary defense? Marla's fingers flew across her console. Patching through now. The main screen flickered, revealing a battered and bloodied commander. His uniform was scorched, his face streaked with soot. Behind him, explosions painted the sky with fire. This is Commander Aldrich of Kepler Defense. We are. A deafening blast rocked the transmission. Being overrun. Requesting immediate aid. Who am I speaking to? Elias stepped forward. Captain Elias Vance of the Nemesis. We're here to help. Aldrich's expression darkened. Impossible. The Council forbade human intervention. Elias' lips curled into a smirk. Guess we missed that memo. Before Aldrich could respond, a tactical warning flashed across the displays. Enemy warships inbound. Marla's voice was sharp. 3 capital-class destroyers just dropped from FTL. More on the way. Ortez cracked his knuckles. Good. I was starting to think this would be too easy. Elias turned to his crew. The Council doesn't want us to fight? Fine. We won't start this fight. But we sure as hell will end it. Rin Voss spun in his chair. Captain, what's the plan? Elias exhaled slowly. The war simulations had told him everything he needed to know. The reptilian invaders, the Voric Dominion, relied on brute force. They crushed civilizations with overwhelming firepower, never expecting their enemies to think faster than them. Humans? That's all we do. He turned to Marla. "Open a wideband transmission." To everyone. She nodded. "You're live in 5, 4, 3. The screen blinked, and suddenly, Elias was broadcasting across the system. To the Kepler defenders, the Vorik warships, and, he hoped, the Council itself. "This is Captain Elias Vance of the Nemesis. You invaded this world because you thought humanity wouldn't fight back. You thought a law could stop us from protecting the innocent." His voice hardened. "You were wrong." Silence filled the void. Then, the Vorik flagship responded, its reptilian warlord appearing on the main screen. "Human," it growled. "You defy the Council's laws." Elias smiled coldly. "So do you." The Vorik commander hissed, baring its fangs. "You cannot stop us." Elias tilted his head. "I wasn't planning to." He nodded to Marla. "Begin." The Nemesis moved before the Vorik even had time to react. Phase 1 had already begun. Their ship's electronic warfare systems overloaded the enemy's targeting sensors, forcing their massive warships to fire blindly. Kepler's defenders, who had been moments from collapse, suddenly found the enemy stumbling. Then came Phase 2, tactical deception. The Nemesis flooded Vorik comms with false fleet movements, forcing their forces to reposition. Their battle lines fractured, and for the first time, the Vorik hesitated. And hesitation was all humanity ever needed. Kepler forces, Elias commanded over comms, target their engines. "We don't need to kill them. We just need to make them run." Aldrich, still on the screen, gaped. "You're not destroying them?" Elias grinned. "That's the difference between us and them. We don't need to." Within minutes, the Vorik forces began to retreat, not because they had been annihilated, but because they had been outplayed. The Council's simulations had been right about one thing. In war, humans don't just fight. We adapt. We dominate. And sometimes, the greatest victory is not fighting at all. As the last Vorik ship vanished into the void, Marla turned to Elias. "Well, Captain? What now?" Elias exhaled, staring at the empty space where the enemy had fled. "Now," he smirked, "now we let the Council decide if they still think the galaxy is safer without us." Because deep down, they already knew the answer. They had been wrong. And humanity? We were just getting started.